All right. So we're going to start heading towards Jerusalem, where Jesus is going to, as you know, going to have the Last Supper with his disciples. He's going to then be arrested. He's going to be put to death. He's going to have a terrible couple of days. And as he is preparing for that, I always like to think about what was he doing right before? What was he doing as he was heading toward what he knew was going to happen? And I always kind of ask myself, what would I do? What would I be doing if I knew at the end of a couple of weeks from now, I am going to be tortured and put to death for things that I did not do? What would I be spending my time doing? Where would I go? Who would I talk to? Who would I spend time with? And I always find it amazing what Jesus did. With those last couple of weeks, basically all he did is go around and teach people. He just wanted to get it out there, and he said, I want to make sure these people understand. He taught his disciples. He taught everybody he came along with. And this week it kind of hit me as I was doing the readings for Lent, just how many times the idea of blindness came up in those last couple of weeks. As he healed people who were physically blind, but also, and more importantly, those who were spiritually blind. And this kind of goes back to the way we even started this year, way back when we were talking about 2020 vision, and how we need to see things the way God sees them, and how many times this came up. So what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of travel. As Jesus was traveling towards Jerusalem to do what he needed to do what he was born to do what his destiny was, which was die for our sins in a horrible, horrible way, and then, of course, most importantly, rise again, right? Victorious. As he heads towards that, he's going to spend some time teaching people, using opportunities to make sure people understand. And today we're really going to focus on that blindness. And we're going to look at people's hearts as they travel along. Because the reality is, we are all born blind. Not physically, some are physically blind, but we are all born spiritually blind. As Romans tells us, because we did not want to keep God in our life, basically, in our thoughts and in our life and in our conversation. Because we did not want to do that, our foolish heart was what? Darkened. We basically live in darkness, and because of that, we are blind to the things and the greatness of God. And Jesus came so that we may see, right? Now, some just choose to stay blind. They like the darkness. They'd rather just kind of stay in what they're doing. Some people are lied to, and they get confused when the light comes in, and they don't quite know what to do with it. Some people just can't handle the truth of it and the light coming in. And they, again, don't know what to do with it. So we're going to see today several people that he's going to talk to, trying to get them so that they can see what is important. And we're going to start, first of all, with the disciples. Everybody go to Mark chapter 10. And in particular, there are two disciples that kind of start this conversation. In Mark chapter 10, we're going to look at verse 35. Mark chapter 10, we're going to start in verse 35, and it says, And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, come unto him, saying, Master, we would that thou shouldest do for us whatsoever we shall desire. Now, James and John are big. They're one of the three, James, John, and Peter. They all knew each other. They were from the same area. They were all fishermen. They were also the closest confidants of Jesus. When Jesus went to be transfigured, who did he take with him? James, John, and Peter. When he's later going to go to the garden and pray, who does he take with him to pray with him? James and John and Peter. So these two are very close to him, and they come and say, please give us our heart's desire. Now again, they know this is God, they know this is Jesus, and I'm going to ask you in your hearts right now, if you had an opportunity to ask Jesus for anything, what would it be? How many coronavirus go away? That's a good one. Job, health, wealth, those kinds of things, right? A lot of things we could ask for. Here's what was on their mind. Verse 36, And Jesus said to them, What would ye that I should do for you? So what do you want? They said unto him, Grant us that we may sit, one on thy right hand and the other on thy left hand, in thy glory. So when we all get to heaven and you're sitting on your rightful throne, John on one side and James on the other, that's all we want. Why would they want that? They're being a little selfish. Would everybody agree here? Their heart's desire was glory. And they're saying, oh, well, Jesus, you get your rightful glory, but we want to be there right with you. We want everybody, when they see you, to see who? Us too. And they're going after glory for themselves. Now, is this what they should be going after? Is this what their hearts desire? No, they're blind. They're blind to what is truly important in life if all they're going after is personal glory, personal power. In fact, Jesus says in verse 38, he said to them, you know not what you ask. You don't understand. You are blind. Can you drink the cup that I drink of and be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with? I mean, can you do what I'm about to do? He knows he's going to go to the cross. He knows he will sit on that throne because he is holy, because he did the will of his Father, because he did pay for the sins of the world, because he did what he was called to do. Can you do that, James and John? Now, here's an interesting thing. Look at the next verse. And they said unto him, we can. And Jesus said unto them, you shall indeed drink of the cup that I drink of. And with the baptism that I'm baptized withal shall you be baptized. Yeah, in fact, you too will. You are both going to die. You are both going to be thrown in prison. You're both going to die for the sake of the Word of God. So yes, that baptism you can do. But does that give you a right then to sit on my right and left? Verse 40, but to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared. Who decides that? Whose glory should we be seeking? God's glory. Let God decide, right? Let the things we do here, in fact, how should we see our life? Should it be we are looking for glory for eternity? We're looking for gifts from God? We're looking for things? No. In fact, look what happens next. First of all, the other disciples get involved. Verse 41, and when the 10 heard it, the other 10 disciples, they began to be much displeased with James and John. But Jesus called them to him and said unto them, you know that they which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and their great ones exercise authority upon them. The way of the world is those who sit on thrones, they do it for their glory, right? They sit on the throne. They have those offices. They have those positions so that everybody will what? Worship them. Should this be our goal? Should what we're looking for in this life is to be worshiped by people, to be glorified by people, to be served by people? No, actually not. In fact, look what Jesus says, verse 43. But so shall it not be among you, but whosoever will be great among you shall be your minister, and whosoever you will be the chiefest shall be what? Servant of all. So we can go through life and be blinded by a desire to be glorified, a desire to be served, and to make our life all about who? Us. And why not? Who's the star of their own movie? We all are, aren't we? Grover, aren't you the star of your film? You were it, right? It's all about you. Of course it is. But should that be what it is about? No, when we truly see, we do what? Serve others, not seek to be served. You say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, let's think about that for a minute. Isn't that what Jesus did? What did Jesus come to do? He could have come to be served, right? He deserves to be served. He's God in the flesh. He's the King of kings and Lord of lords. Of course he should be served. But is that why he came? He made his life all about who? Others. He came to serve, even going to the cross, as we read earlier. Even serving us by dying for us. And even now, what does Jesus do? He's the good shepherd, right? And helps us, poor little sheep, and helps us with life, and ministers to us each and every day. We ought to have that same sight. As we look around this world, we should be saying, not how can others glorify me? How can I do things so I can gain more power over other people? Instead, it should be, how can I serve others? Let's keep going in the story. Everybody go to Luke chapter 18. As he continues along towards Jerusalem, he stops by a little sleepy town called Jericho. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Yes. But it's not that Jericho, but it's a Jericho. Luke chapter 18, starting in verse 35. Luke chapter 18, starting in verse 35. And it came to pass that he, Jesus, was come nigh unto Jericho. A certain blind man sat by the wayside begging. And hearing the multitude pass by, he asked what it meant. And they told him that Jesus of Nazareth passeth by. And he cried, saying, Jesus, thou son of David, have mercy on me. Now, before we get too far, we need to understand who the blind person is. Funny, but the one here who is actually not blind is the guy who's physically blind. Because the blind people we're going to be talking about here are the self-righteous people. Because actually Bartimaeus here, blind Bartimaeus, this is his name, we find out in another passage. But Bartimaeus here actually is physically blind, but spiritually, can he see? Yes. When he hears that it is Jesus coming, he has faith, doesn't he? He knows that Jesus is the one that can heal. He knows Jesus is the one that can help him. And he asks for mercy. He asks for grace, right? So actually, spiritually, he's not blind, is he? He understands who Jesus is. The true blind people are the people who speak up next. Look at verse 39. Of Luke chapter 18. And they which went before rebuked him that he should hold his peace, but he cried so much the more, Thou son of David, have mercy on me. See, people would look at a blind person, would look at a beggar, look at somebody who was handicapped, look at somebody who could not hear. And what was their first thought? Cursed of God. Either they or their parents did something wrong. They deserve everything they get. They are not righteous people. They are not as good as who? Me. Isn't that the way we do it? If we see somebody struggling, we see somebody who's down, we say, oh, well, clearly it's their fault. Clearly they're just a bunch of sinners. They're not righteous like me. I who have no problems. I who can't, wait a minute. How many here got problems? Raise your hand on the line there. Anybody got problems? We all got problems, don't we? But the reality is we look at those who have more problems and start thinking in our head, well, they must deserve it. But is that the way we should see them? Should we judge them? Should we say they're not worth it? Should we tell them to be quiet and not seek grace and mercy from God? Of course not. We wouldn't think that way, would we? I want you to be careful here. Sometimes we do, don't we? How many times do we look at people of other religions or look at people who are having problems and say, well, it's probably their fault. They made their bed, let them lie in it, instead of seeing them with compassion. Look at what Jesus does. Verse 40. And Jesus stood and commanded him to be brought unto him. And when he was come near, he asked him, saying, What wilt thou that I shall do unto thee? Again, same question to the disciples, right? What do you want? And did he want to sit on the right hand of God in glory? No. He said, this is what I need. And he said, Lord, that I might receive my sight. And Jesus said unto him, Receive thy sight, thy faith has saved thee. And he looked at him with what? Compassion. Not judgment. Don't look at people with judgment, because we are sinners too, aren't we? And we have what we have by the grace of God, don't we? And we should have compassion on those and not be these self-righteous people who tell them just go away. We need to open our eyes and have compassion on all those around us, to serve and have compassion on them. Let's go a step further, because then he goes into Jericho and he meets a very interesting character named Zacchaeus. Chapter 19, we're going to start in verse 1. Zacchaeus, if you remember from children's church, when you're looking at it, was a wee little man. A wee little man was he. He climbed up in a sycamore tree to see what he could see, right? We all know the song. Let's read the story. Who is this guy? Chapter 19, verse 1. And Jesus entered and passed through Jericho, and behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, which was the chief among the publicans, and he was, of course, what? Rich, because publicans were the tax collectors. And the way the system worked back then is people, and these were Israelites, these were Jews, basically they were hired by the Roman government to collect the taxes from the people. And they would get a list, here's the people, and this is how much they owe. And they may get a list and say, okay, Travis owes $100 on his taxes. So Travis would walk up, he'd come up and say, how much do I owe? And the publican would say what? Anything they wanted. Now, how many thought they would say 80? No. You don't say 80 if the government wants 100. You say 120, 150, 200, 250, however much you think you can get out of them. And what does the Roman government want? Just the 100. Just the 100. And then you send that off, and what do you get to keep? Everything else. How many want to guess that publicans, these tax collectors, were not very popular? Let's face it, even if they were just collecting what they were supposed to collect, would they be popular? No. But the fact that they were stealing from their own people, this made them extra unpopular. And that's what Zacchaeus was. Look at verse 3. And he sought to see Jesus, who he was. So he wanted to know. I don't know who Jesus is. I've heard about him maybe, but I want to go see who he is. And could not for the press of people, because he was what? Little of stature. So he couldn't see over everybody. And again, if Zacchaeus is saying, excuse me, can I get through? What is everybody in town doing? No, I'm sorry. Give him a little hip, give him a little pushing back. Nope, can't see it. So he's not a stupid man. He says, I will get over the crowd somehow. So verse 4, and he ran before and climbed up in a sycamore tree to see him, for he was to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and what? Saw him. Now again, did he see him with the same blindness that the self-righteous people of Jericho saw him? No. He saw him with what? Compassion. Right? And he says, I'm going to serve you today. I'm going to minister to you. I'm going to try to open your eyes. Because the reality is, in this case, it is a sinner. Nobody would doubt this. Zacchaeus was a sinner. By the way, we're all sinners. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. But he hadn't really realized that yet. He really hadn't come to the conclusion yet that his sin was something he needed to deal with. He hadn't dealt with the fact that he needed to do what is right. And Jesus says, I am going to come and dine with you today. Now, what do you think the people of the city thought? Does he know who that guy is? Does he know what he does? How could a holy man like Jesus go around with somebody like that? Well, because he saw him as somebody who needed what? Salvation. In fact, let's see how it plays out. Verse 6, and he made haste, Zacchaeus did, and came down and received him joyfully to his house. And when they saw it, all murmured, saying that he was gone to be guest with a man that is a sinner. Again, those self-righteous people out there, don't judge. Have hope, right? And what happened? Verse 8, and Zacchaeus stood and said unto the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have taken anything from any man by false accusation, I restore him fourfold. Zacchaeus had a change of heart, didn't he? Zacchaeus could see now that what he was doing was what? Wrong. And he repented of his sin and even made good on restitution for his sin. Now, the interesting thing about the story is always, did Jesus actually say anything to Zacchaeus? There's no record of it. But just by being there, just by being compassionate, just by not judging him, Zacchaeus got to hear him and listen to what he was saying to others. And he got to understand who Jesus was. And all of a sudden his eyes were what? Open to the truth. And he needed to be saved. And he was. Now, was that good enough for everybody else? Verse 9, and Jesus said unto him, This day is salvation come to this house, for so much as he also is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which is lost. Who do you think that last statement was for? Everybody who was bad-mouthing? I didn't come to heal the well. What doctor runs around healing people of being well? The doctor's going to make a lot of money. But doctors should be going around healing what? Those who are sick. And that's why Jesus comes. By the way, what should we see? When we look around, again, should we judge people? No. Don't prejudge people. Well, if we find out they are sinners, should we judge them then? No. Instead, we should what? Seek to save, just as Jesus did. Seek to tell them the truth. Seek to open their eyes. Let our eyes be open to ways that we can help them see, right? And let us do that as well. Well, Jesus continues. Let's go to John chapter 11. And this time we're going to be looking at people who are having a tough time. Anybody know anybody like that? Anybody going through some trying times? Anybody? The entire country is going through some trying times right now. But some worse than others, right? Some people are sick. Some people have died. Some family members have died. That's tough times. Some people have lost jobs. That's tough times, isn't it? We're going through tough times, but this isn't the only tough times we're ever going to go through. We're always going to have these, right? There's always going to be storms. There's always going to be trouble. And we're going to see here as Jesus deals with people going through a tough time, and it all is surrounding a man by the name of Lazarus. Lazarus was a good friend of Jesus and of the disciples. Him and his two sisters, Mary and Martha. In fact, it seems like every time Jesus went to Jerusalem, their house was in a little town called Bethany, right nearby. It seemed like he always stopped by there. Was always going by for dinner, hang out for a little while. It was kind of a nice, peaceful place outside the hustle and bustle of Jerusalem. And here in chapter 11 of John, verse 1, now a certain man was sick named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore his sister sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. That's a trying time, isn't it? Our brother is sick. So by faith, who do they reach out to? Jesus. That makes sense, right? But what did Jesus do? Verse 4. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Now, his disciples were probably very happy to hear that, because Jerusalem is where the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the chief priests have all basically decided we need to get rid of Jesus. They've already decided this. And so now they don't want to go anywhere near Jerusalem, right? And Bethany is where? Right outside Jerusalem. So they don't want to really go down there anyway. So they're like, great. But does that mean they're not going? Let's see what happens. Verse 5. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. Now, I don't know about you, but Daniel, if your mom called you and said, I'm sick, can you come help me? Would you wait 2 days or would you go immediately? Good. We can get that on tape. He said immediately, so you're good. So, yeah, of course you would. You love, and it says, hey, he loved them, but he sat there for 2 more days. What is he waiting for? Well, actually, he's waiting for Lazarus to die. Sounds weird, doesn't it? Didn't he just say he wasn't unto death? See, God knows everything, doesn't he? He knows how this is going to play out and how all of this will glorify God. Verse 7. Then after that he saith to his disciples, let us go to Judea again. His disciples saying to him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? So wait. You said this wasn't unto death. You said it was going to be okay, and now you're saying we're going? They're going to kill you. And Jesus says, no. Relax. This is all good. Lazarus is asleep. We need to go. It's best to walk in the daylight, right? Wherever God sends us, no matter what, it's best to walk that way, right? And of course, disciples say, oh, good, Lazarus is sleeping. Excellent. He's going to get better. We don't need to go, right? And then Jesus plainly says, no, Lazarus is what? Dead. Now again, if you're a disciple, what are you thinking? Well, that's all right too, because we don't have to go. There's nothing we can do, right? But I love what they say. Verse 12. Then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he do well. Howbeit Jesus spake of his death. But they thought that he had spoken of taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus said unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. Then said Thomas, oh yes, that Thomas, old doubting Thomas. What does he say? Unto his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. Now, does that sound like a lot of faith to you? That's no faith, is it? He was what? Blind to who he's talking to. Who is he talking to? He's talking to Jesus. Has Jesus got it all under control? And then when we are in trials, sometimes we can take that defeatist attitude too. Oh, well, nothing we can do. We might as well just die. Might as well just let it happen. Instead of trusting who? Trust God. Trust him. Trust that he knows where he's taking it. And even if it is through the valley of the shadow of death, is it okay? Even if it is through the storm, is it going to be okay? Just trust him. Don't have this defeatist attitude. Trust him. And if he says go, go. Well, they did go. And then Martha had something to say. Let's all jump down to verse 19. Jesus is coming. He's finally, several days now after Lazarus had died. 4 days, in fact. 4 days since Lazarus had died. All the mourners are still there. That's what they did back then. The mourners were there. Lazarus is in the tomb. Stone rolled in front. It's over, right? And now Jesus comes. And Martha runs out to see. Verse 19. And many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. But Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou ask of God, God will give it thee. That's called faith, right? I know if you had been here, it would have been okay. Would have been healed. But I even know now, whatever you ask, it will happen. But look what happens next, verse 23. Jesus said unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. And by the way, will we all rise again? Yeah. Those who know Jesus as Savior will rise to glory forever and ever to be with him. Unfortunately, those who die without Christ will rise again to eternal judgment. We will rise again. And he knew Lazarus. Lazarus had his faith in him. Lazarus was going to rise again to glory. And Martha knew that too. And they had that hope. Verse 24. Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and life. He that believes in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Believest thou this? Do you believe in me? Do you believe I will raise them again someday to be with me? Do you believe that? She said to him, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. And when she had said this, she went on her way. Martha is a good example of somebody who had tremendous faith, didn't she? And not just faith in the future. Yes, I know someday we'll rise again. Not just faith that God could have done something, could have kept him from dying. But even now, she still believes that he can do something. Do you have that faith? Are your eyes open to the fact that God can do something right now? That he's there with you now, whatever you're going through. It's like when the disciples were in the boat and the storm was raging and Jesus was laying in the front asleep. They panicked. They thought they were going to die. And finally, they wake him up and say, Lord, don't you care that we're going to die? What did Jesus say? Oh, ye of little faith. He's there with us, isn't he? Is he with us now? Even in our homes when we're stuck there all day, no place to go, is the Lord with us? Is the Lord going to walk with us every step of the way? The answer is yes, right? Let your eyes open. Don't be the doom and gloom of Thomas. Oh, we're all going to die. Be more like Martha, who says, I see there is hope. Isn't there? And then finally, let's look at the last group. As we know, Jesus did ask to go to the tomb. Jesus wept as he saw all the people mourning. They've been mourning for 4 days, crying over the death of his good friend. And then he says, go ahead and roll that stone away. And he walked up and says, Lazarus, come out. And who came out? Lazarus. Bound still? Unwrap him, folks. He's alive. Should that have opened the people's eyes? If you had been there, that's always one of those things. Be, well, if God will do something amazing, then I will believe. I would like to think that if I hadn't believed yet in Jesus, that if I saw him raise a man from the dead who'd been dead for 4 days, that I'd say, okay, now I'm convinced. The amazing part is some of them there were still not convinced. Jump down to verse 44. Jesus said, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus said unto them, loose him and let him go. Then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen these things which Jesus did believed on him. Many did. But, verse 46, some of them went their ways to the Pharisees and told them what things Jesus had done. And that is just such a sad statement. Sad state of affairs. They saw it with their own eyes. They saw him buried. They had mourned for 4 days. And then they saw Jesus walk up and him come out. They had to unwrap him. They saw the whole thing. And their first thought was, let's go ask the Pharisees what we should believe. Don't you trust your own eyes? And shouldn't we trust what God has done? And shouldn't we believe? When we're going through trials, we need to believe. Believe because of what we have seen him do in the past. Believe him because of his promises of today. Believe him because of his promises of tomorrow, right? Trust the Lord in times of trial. Open your eyes to what he has done, what he is doing now, and to what he promises to do. Right? God is with you. And how great is your God? Can he raise a man from the dead? Can he, being put to death, rise again? What can't he do? He's the one that spoke the entire universe into creation. What can't he do? He can see us through, can he? Put your trust in him and have hope. Then finally, let's see what happens next. Last place. John chapter 12, verse 1. Then Jesus, 6 days before the Passover. So we're getting closer here, aren't we? The Passover is when Jesus is going to be arrested. He's going to be put to death and all of that. We're 6 days out now. And what is he doing? Where is he at? Then 6 days before the Passover came to Bethany, where Lazarus which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. So he goes back to Mary and Martha and Lazarus' house. Again, which is near where? Jerusalem. What is he doing down there? Well, he's going to be going to the Passover in Jerusalem. We'll see that next week. Verse 2. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of them that sat at the table with him. And Lazarus was there eating. How surreal would that be? You've seen a man die, buried, and then a few days later you're sitting there having dinner with him. Pretty weird. In fact, one of my favorite things is you see how far the mind of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, how far it had gone. They got together on basically how can they kill Lazarus? Because the longer he lives, the more people will believe in Jesus. Isn't that just ridiculous? But that's how blind they were. But for those who are willing to see the miracles, see what God can do, they had faith in him, right? But look at verse 3. Then took Mary a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Then saith one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, yes, that Judas, Simon's son, which should betray him, why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, and had the bag and bare what was put therein. Now all this John is writing, he had no idea at the time. But afterwards, now they know exactly who Judas is. And I want you to think about that for a minute. The blind disciple. I'm going to put quotes around it. Now I want you to think about Judas for a minute. What had Judas seen? Had Judas seen him walk on the water? Yes. Had they seen him heal, raise Lazarus from the dead? Yes. Healed the blind man, healed the lepers, cast out demons. Had he seen him do all those things? Feed the 5,000? He'd seen it all with his eyes, yet we know that within a week he's going to be selling him out and betraying him to those in authority. Because he said, I see the truth, but I prefer to believe the lie. I would prefer to stay what? Blind. What had he heard? He'd heard Jesus teach all of these things with such authority, had seen all of this, and yet he said, I will remain blind. And what was his problem? Well, you can see a little bit of it there, can't you? He saw somebody there using some very costly ointment to worship God. And his first thought was what? Now, I know he says help the poor, but does he really care about the poor? Not really. That was not really his thing. What does he care about? Earthly things, right? All he sees is, boy, I wish I had that money. I wish I could have that in my bag so I can use it for my purpose, so I can have more stuff instead of wasting it on this guy. And that's sometimes the way we can look at it, can't we? How many of us get distracted at times by the things of this world? We all do. And that's the kind of blindness, isn't it? How many have ever seen the demonstration of the dancing bear? Where you have to count the people and how many times the ball is passed, and all of a sudden you go back and look at the video again and you find out there was a dancing bear going along the foot because you didn't see it. You were blind to it because you were distracted. That's Judas. Throughout that ministry, as he saw all those things Jesus was doing, as he heard all those things that he was saying, he went through all of that, he was the whole time distracted by the things of this world. That's why he would go out and sell them out for 30 pieces of silver. Because that was more important to him than anything else. He was blind to the truth that was right in front of him because he was distracted by the things of this world. Instead, we should do what? Look at verse 7. Then said Jesus, let her alone. Against the day of my burying has she kept this. For the poor always you have with you, but me you have not always. Yes, the poor we do have with us. There's poor everywhere. Should we help them? He's not saying we shouldn't at all. That's not his point. He's just saying when you have an opportunity to do the right thing in glorifying God, in serving Him, we should do it, shouldn't we? And see the important things. And the important things are the eternal things. The important things are the things God has for us. And if we focus on those things, we will see the truth, won't we? This whole world is blinded to the truth. As Jesus was going to the cross, as he was headed to his grave, as he was headed to victory, eventually, he said, I need to spend some time and I still need to teach, don't I? And I want to teach these people because they're still blind. They still don't see. Some are sinners. They need to see. They need to be saved, don't they? Some are self-righteous people. They need to learn. They need to learn not to judge, to have compassion on those around them. Some of them are self-serving, just looking for their own glory. No, that's a distraction. Don't do that. Some are just looking for things of this world, treasures of this world. No, get off of those things. And some are going through tough times. And the key to all of it is putting our eyes on who? On God. And the things that are important to Him. And that allows us then to serve others, have compassion on others, seek to save others, believe and hope in God, and focus on the important things because the eyes are off who? Ourselves. Right? There's a word, I have this. I'm very myopic. So I can't see. But I always like, there's a term I've used, I don't know if I coined this or not, I've never heard it before, but I say it's myopic, because I'm so nearsighted, the only person I can see is me. And that's not good, is it? And for all these people, that was the problem. They were focused so much on them and themselves and the things of this world and the things that are immediate, and Jesus the whole time is trying to get them to say, no, focus on the eternal things, focus on other people, focus on the other needs. And then you will glorify God. Then you will be on the right path. And frankly, wasn't that what Jesus was doing? Again, he's only a couple of weeks out, and at the end, only 6 days out from giving his life for us. And what does he care about? Other people. In fact, we'll see on the cross itself, what was his focus on? Other people. It's amazing, isn't it? We need to do the same thing. In fact, right there at the bottom, what blinds us? On our paper, that's the question. What can blind us? Can we be distracted by the things of this world? Absolutely. Can we sometimes look at the truth and say, I really don't like it. I prefer this lie. Can we sometimes just be blind, just be unable to understand and unable to see the things? Yes. We need to go to who for help? Go to God. As Psalm 34:8 says, taste and see that the Lord is good, right? Stay close to him. See the things of him. Focus your eyes on him. Turn your eyes upon Jesus, as the song says. Look full in his wonderful grace. And the things of earth, all these things we're going through, all these things that the world desires will grow strangely dim, right? In the light of his glory and grace. Fix your eyes on him, especially during this Easter season, but year-round. Fix your eyes on him and don't be blind. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. Thank you for these examples that you've given us. We thank you for Jesus, who was willing to come and to be faithful and die for us and to keep his eyes focused on what is important. Let us do the same thing. Let us go about to serve others, have compassion on others, save others, not with a judgmental attitude, but with an attitude of love. Let us also make sure we're not distracted by the things of this world, but also that we also, during these difficult times, would turn and see you and have the kind of hope that Martha had. And Lord, not be defeatist like others. Let us focus on you and your word and your love, that we may have hope. In Jesus' name I pray these things. Amen. Everybody please turn your hymnal to number 87. For those at home, it's the song I just talked about. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Number 87. We're going to sing the first verse and chorus together of number 87. O soul, are you weary and troubled? I think that goes for just about everybody right now. No light in the darkness you see. There's light for a look at the Savior, and life more abundant and free. Put your eyes on him as we sing. Number 87. That's the message of the day. Keep your eyes on him. Get them off yourself. Get them to those around you. And therefore we will not be blind. I want to thank everybody for joining us online. Thank you all for being here, and we are dismissed.